Hey, it's Jason Soloman and Scott O'Connell with Tactical Investment Advisors, and today's tactical topic is annuity cap rates. Scott, can you tell us what an annuity cap rate is?
Yeah, cap rates are typically associated with fixed index annuities, and that is how you get credit from year to year on your annuity. And the way it works is each company will have a cap rate on a certain index, and that cap rate basically means that's the ceiling. That's the maximum amount that you can receive for that term. Most terms are 1 year, some could be 2 or 3 years. But in this conversation, we'll pretend that the term is a 1 year term. So from the last year, 1 year period, if that index that you choose is positive, you will receive up to the cap. Say, for instance, the cap is 10%. That's the maximum amount of interest that you will receive on your contract. If the index performs better than 10%, you don't receive the additional amount. Now, the good news is if the index is negative for that year period or that term, you don't lose anything in that situation, which should be really a priority when looking at index annuities.
Yeah, and in this case, we're talking specifically about fixed indexed annuities. There are other annuities that have caps on them that they may have some floors where you can actually lose money. We're talking specifically about a fixed indexed annuity where your floor is actually zero, and the cap, again, is the most amount of interest that they're going to allow you to make. Scott used an example of a 10% cap rate. That's perfect. So if the S&P 500 is up, for example, over 15% for the 1 year period that you've had your money in there, you're only going to get 10%. But if the S&P 500 is down 30%, you're going to end up with zero that year, and you start over at your new high water mark. Indexes can be different with every company. You could have an index like the S&P 500 that's been around for 50, 60 years or more. And then there's some other indexes that may look very attractive, but what's the issue with some of those, Scott?
Yeah, you'll see some indexes that'll have a much higher cap rate, say, than the S&P 500. The issue that we run into is that those indexes with the higher cap rates or higher participation rates typically have not been around as long. So they don't have a track record of performance, where the S&P 500 has a over 80-year track record of performance. So you can have a little bit of a expectation of your performance over the course. Of course, it's not guaranteed, but you could have an expectation of what you may receive.
Sure.
As far as interest being earned. And when interest is earned, the great thing about fixed index annuities is that it's locked in. So if the S&P performs negatively for the next year or longer, they can't take it away.
Yeah, if you've picked a product that doesn't have any fees, that's right. You're never going to have less than the amount that you took out unless you make a withdrawal. Now, the hypotheticals that Scott mentioned, they may show you a 10 or 15-year history, but you've got to dig deep. If that's not the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the Dow, or any other well-known index, you're going to have to dig deep to make sure that index has a history of more than 18 or 24 months. Now, are all caps the same, Scott? Meaning, if I have a 10% cap company that I'm looking at versus maybe a company that's only offering 8.5, why would I consider the 8.5?
Yeah, so the question of why, right? So when you see caps on index annuities and one is higher than the other, the first thing you should ask is, well, why is it higher? Well, there's several reasons. One could be the strength of the company. The other could be it's not actually the same index. That's part of it. But one of the things that we're seeing more of now is that some companies will lock in those cap rates for the term or for the surrender period. So if it's a 10-year surrender period, they're not a lot of them, but more are doing it now than they used to. They will lock in those cap rates for the 10-year surrender period or the 7-year surrender period.
And you may like that if you want to protect yourself against the insurance company changing your cap unfavorably, then make them promise to lock into that cap rate for the entire term. So in that case, it may be worth it to choose a company that's paying 8.5%, but they're going to give you up to 8.5% every year for 10 years versus XYZ company who may promise 13% this year, but you look at the fine print, they could knock that down to as low as maybe 2 or 2.8. You make that call what works best for you. I prefer to have my customers in a situation where they're more in control. And to the point about those caps changing, I noticed as I was rate shopping this morning for a customer, I had a client from many years ago that had a renewal come up, and the renewal was going to offer an S&P 500 cap of 4.75%. That's way lower than what everything else is being offered on the market. And the worst part about that is if there was new money put into this same company, that company was going to offer 9. That gives you a real idea of how the varying caps can work and should arm you with some information to help you make a more informed decision about which company, if any of them, are appropriate for you.
Yeah, because when we work with our clients, one of the things, especially those that are retired or close to retired, one of their wishes or one of the things that's important to them, and it helps us as financial advisors, is predictability. And so the more variables that we know what the outcome will be, or we have a pretty good idea of what the outcome will be, the better it is for planning, the better it is for your state of mind, the better it is for your peace. Because if there's a lot of variables that are unknown, then it is harder to get a feel for expectation of the performance or anything else that may come about within the annuity.
That's it for annuity caps. Write some comments, write some questions. We look forward to seeing you on the next video.
Till next time.
It's kind of funny.
Investment advisory services offered through Tactical Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Insurance products and services are not offered through Tactical Investment Advisors, but are offered and sold through individually licensed and appointed agents with Harmony Insurance Group. The content of this channel is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There's no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives. Indexed or fixed annuities are not designed for short-term investments and may be subject to caps, restrictions, fees, and surrender charges as described in the annuity contract. All annuities and fixed income securities are guaranteed based on the financial abilities of each company and are not guaranteed by Tactical Investment Advisors or Harmony Insurance Group. Information provided is not intended as tax or legal advice, should not be relied on as such. You're encouraged to seek tax or legal advice from an independent professional. Tactical Investment Advisors is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency.